Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey there, it's AZ. Welcome to episode 148. And I just returned home from a whirlwind trip to New York City, and I had so much fun. It was kind of an impulsive trip. I cannot tell you how excited I am and was for this trip. It was incredible. But during the trip, I sat down in person with my friend, Dr. Brittany Hollerbach, three-time guest, and we talked about research and formulating research questions and how to get involved in research and all of the things. So listen to Brittany, then go get involved with Science of the Station and 7-Minute Science, and get registered for the Women's Tactical Human Performance Summit to hear Brittany talk. Have a great day. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here in New York City in person with Dr. Brittany Hollerbach. Brittany, say hello again.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. How many times have you been on the podcast?
Once, right? Just once, twice?
This is 3 times now.
No way.
Right? You were on by yourself. You were on with the Beltane Guild.
That's right.
And now you're on all by yourself again.
Oh, wow. I feel like kind of a big shot now.
You are a big shot. You are now tied with Megan Lautz and Vanessa Frost.
Oh.
Everyone has had 3 visits.
Now I feel like there's a bit of a competition.
Yeah.
Okay, who's going to get the next one?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Okay, so I want to talk really quickly. I try to not put the personal stuff at the beginning of the podcast, but also I feel like this is really important information because women get stuff done. And I mentioned that we were in New York. Brittany, first, do you want to share why we're in New York?
We're in New York. Honestly, we started a conversation. So I don't know how many people are familiar with the Wicked movie that just came out.
Everyone.
So exciting. But that swirled conversations about how we should see it on Broadway. And certain people in this room, meaning me, had never seen it on or off Broadway, on the stage, in a movie, in any capacity. I had never seen Wicked, which is like a crime. And some people have seen it multiple times on and off Broadway. Mm-hmm. And so we just started this conversation about like a pipe dream, like, oh, it'd be really cool to see it on Broadway in New York City. And then all of a sudden we were like planning a trip to New York City and like, oh, let's go see Wicked. And oh, while we're at it, hey, let's see Hamilton as well.
Yes. Yes. So it took us all of about, I want to say 7 to 10 minutes maximum to not only decide that we were going to do it, but decide like, I have points. We're flying in at this time. do you want to see Hamilton too? It was crazy. I don't operate that way usually. This is my new normal though. I hope. Do you operate that way usually, Brittany?
So I'm divided because I think in smaller things, I'm impulsive and like in that, yes, I want to do this. Let's get it done. Let's do it right now. In something as big as travel, like with a plane ticket and a hotel and buying like tickets to a show. No, I don't think that I'm normally quite so like, oh, let's book it and do it and get it done. So I'm really proud of us for doing that. But I do think in smaller things, I'm a bit, what I would say like impulsive, like let's just make the decision right now and let's do it. But no, I think for travel, that was a big decision that we were like, all right, yep, we're in.
It was a big deal. Give me an example of smaller things that you're okay with being impulsive with.
I think I'm someone that I don't think, at least, that I put a lot of thought into a decision. Like there's a lot of people that I work with that are which is, and it's a wonderful thing. I think you have to have a balance of people who are a bit impulsive and are like, okay, let's just make this decision.
Let's
Whether
do it.
It's like, now I'm trying to think of a good example. Like like a conference. Do we want to put in this proposal? Do we not want to put in this proposal? What do you think about this sentence? Even sending an email, right? Some people can stew over what are the right words, what's appropriate, what sounds correct. I'm like, read over it, make sure it's professional, obviously, but send it. Yeah, it's good. That's it. Like my brain doesn't want to spend any more time on it than is necessary. And so, that doesn't mean that that's always the right way to go. But yeah, so that's my brain. Like it's exhausting to me to spend too much time on tasks like that, where sometimes more thought is a good thing.
Oh, you know what? That's funny. You bring up spending time on tasks, because we were just at dinner and we spent so much time talking about like systems and processes and all of that stuff. So yeah, we need all of those things. But first off, if you hear a hotel room or hotel door slamming in the background, well, it's because we're in a hotel. Sorry. But what I wanted to talk to Brittany about today was research in general, because I have been saying for at least 5 years, probably longer, like get involved in research. If you are a fire department, get involved in research, which Brittany did a ton of research with fire departments. I want to hit on that for a second, because recruiting participants for your research is kind of tough sometimes, right?
Oh my God, so hard. So can I just tell you?
Yes, please tell me
My
all
dear
the things.
colleague, who I shall not name, may or may not have compared volunteer firefighters to cockroaches. Now, let me explain. They all say they want to be involved in research, but when you shine a light on them, meaning you ask them to be involved, they scatter and you can't find any of them. So it was a very good analogy. The whole crew was like, I don't think you can say that. But I mean, it was, of course, just an office discussion, right? But it's a very true analogy. And it's certainly not just volunteer firefighters, and it's not just the fire service either. It's everyone in this day and age. We are so busy, and I'm guilty of it as well. If I get surveys from journals or from schools or from other researchers, even, I'm like, let me weigh it out. I don't know if I have enough time for this. Or you leave does anyone like leave the email unread, like with the best intentions? Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this.
No, you're not.
And then I never do, because I just never find the time. So yeah, it is incredibly hard to find research subjects. And it's just, we're all competing for time.
Well, so lesson number 1 is when you see a call for research subjects, and you have to always make sure that you qualify, because sometimes it requires an in-person visit. I just saw one. It was a great study, but you had to have 3 in-person visits to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Like, that's just not feasible. But when you find a study and you qualify for a study and you can do a study, raise your hand and say yes. Good advice?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you want to give back to the fire service, like the best researchers are out there. They want to study these questions, but we can't answer the questions without getting data from folks. And whether that's filling out a survey, like it may take a little bit of your time, but maybe it's just filling out a survey. You can usually do it from your phone, from a tablet, from the computer. Sometimes it requires an in-person visit to your local college or university or research group. But it often doesn't take too much of your time if you're really dedicated to doing it.
I agree. So the next thing I want to talk about is the fact that I'm so happy, first of all, because I think people are listening when I say get involved in research. But I've had a few people contact me and kind of say, hey, I want to do this research project. And they kind of already have a plan in their head. Like, I want to do X, Y, and Z with this equipment and this thing. And I always have to kind of tell them like, hey, hold on 1 second. Like, what's the question you're trying to answer? So let's talk about questions that people are trying to answer. So let's just riff on things that maybe the fire service would be interested in answering. You go, I go.
Oh, I love this. Okay, what about shift schedules and sleep?
Oh, you totally took mine. So good. Shift schedules and sleep. I love it. How about start times? You know, the traditional 7 or 8 a.m. versus noon or 7 or 8 p.m. How about that one? What else?
Love that. How about wearing our gear. So if we wear our gear to the grocery store, like the percentage of time that we spend in gear, is that correlated to our exposure risk and cancer risk?
Oh, that's a really good one. How about, speaking on riffing on cancer, how about firefighters that eat more fruits and vegetables? Is that negatively correlated with cancer risk?
Oh, I love that. Okay. So what about weight gain? Talking about adiposity. So whether you measure it with BMI or waist circumference, does extra weight have anything to do with your cancer risk?
Oh, so good. How about a second part of that research study? Same one. Does extra weight have anything to do with injury risk?
Love that.
Ooh. This is like a game show.
I like this kind of game show.
See?
This is good. So semi off the cancer topic, but similar, interested in offspring of firefighters, and are they impacted by the exposures that firefighters are exposed to? Does that carry into the offspring of firefighters?
Oh, so good. Does body composition matter when taking and passing the CPAT?
Ooh, love that.
Mm-hmm.
Does gender matter when taking and passing the CPAT?
Oh, also good. So all of these are great questions, and there may be research on these things already, but also what, as Brittany says, I did not plan this, as Brittany always says, more research needed. More research needed. So,
there's actually a shirt that you can buy on the Science Alliance that says more research needed, in case you need that.
I may or may not own it in purple and aqua.
Because you need it in all the colors.
You need it in all the colors. So that's, I guess, the point that we're trying to make, first of all, is before you decide your research design, before you go getting ahead of yourself and like, I need this piece of equipment, I need a force plate, I need a body composition, I need whatever, saliva testing, whatever. Before you get ahead of yourself, you have to figure out what the question is. So always think about what the question is. And when you think about what the question is, after that, then you have to go and look in the literature. Has someone already answered the question? Tell us about the lit review, Brittany.
Right. That's so important. So we hear AZ and me and my crew at NDRI, we're lucky to present all over the US and sometimes outside of the US. And there's always wonderful questions from firefighters. Oftentimes they ask questions about, well, has anyone looked at this? And it's like, well, actually, yes, this was published, let's say 5 years ago or 8 years ago or last year. So I think it's hard because oftentimes as researchers, we're like, hey, yeah, I published in the peer-reviewed literature in the Journal of Applied Medical Sciences. And like the fire service is like, okay, I don't know what that is. Exactly. And who cares? And I don't read that. So on one hand, it's like, you can't blame the firefighter for asking the question about research that they don't know exists, because all we've done is publish it in peer-reviewed like scientific journals, which is meant for further scientific exploration and researchers building off of those questions that have been answered. That doesn't mean that we've broken it down for the fire service for them to understand or know what research has or hasn't been done and what questions we've been able to answer. So not at any point are we putting this like as a fault on the fire service or the firefighter, but it is so important to start educating the fire service on what's been done and how you can figure that out. Like, so for example, we know if I don't know something at dinner, we use Google like at least 5 times to figure out what certain foods were, what, I don't know, different topics we were talking about. We were like, oh, I don't know. Here, let's just Google it. So for peer-reviewed literature, there's something called Google Scholar. So literally in Google, if you type in Google Scholar, it'll take you to the search engine that helps you find peer-reviewed literature. So you could type in like firefighter cancer and it will return articles that have been published on firefighter cancer. Same thing with firefighter reproductive health or physical activity and injury risk. And so you can see what perhaps is there, what isn't there. And maybe through reading through the article titles, if you click on it, you could read a little bit more, read the abstract. That's kind of an overview or summary of the article. And through reading through some of those things, you might be able to generate better, more refined research questions by seeing, okay, this has been done, but I don't see that this specific piece has been answered through this research. And that helps you refine your question to ask an even better question.
That was such a good answer and leads me to one of my favorite discussions, which is, I actually have a video up on my social media, and it basically is one of my crew members. And the punchline is like, YouTube is not a credible source of information. But I know it's overwhelming. If I did a search for creatine and athletic performance, I would return thousands of articles, thousands. And even, firefighter fitness, you're going to get lots and lots and lots of returns. And so there's a couple of things you can do. The first thing is looking for review articles. That is super helpful. Position stands. If you are, say, now this is not firefighter related, but you are a pregnant athlete, you could look for the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology position stand on, exercise and pregnancy. Those are ways to sort of distill down the information.
And the fire service has position statements as well.
Yeah.
So like the IAFC, the IFF will put out position statements on current hot topics. During COVID, they put out position statements on different ways you can protect yourself or your department. So there's also some fire service related position statements as well.
Yeah. So let's say the position statements, the position stands aren't going to be sufficient. We need to dig into the research a little bit more. And what you're going to find is that you can pull up a lovely article and it's going to say, please give me $69.95. And it's so frustrating because the authors in some cases have to pay to get their research published. And then they turn around and the journals turn around and charge the people that want the research. So I have a couple tips for getting a hold of research if it's behind a paywall. So the first one is, I always say, if you have an EDU address, usually your educational institution can help you get the article. If you contact the corresponding author, usually they're super happy to send it to you. That's one way. And then the last way that I always like to use is Sci-Hub. My favorite Sci-Hub. It looks so scary. Brittany's opening a Pellegrino and she's trying to be so careful not to hear the shh. It's going to be fine. But Sci-Hub looks super, super scary. It looks like a Russian hacker site. And it probably is. For all we know, it probably is. But I am able to get a lot of research on Sci-Hub. So there are ways to get that research. Brittany's like, no wonder your computer keeps breaking. I had to get a new computer just yesterday. It's fine. All right. So now we've done a little bit of a lit search. We know what's out there. We're sort of refining the question. What's next? Now we know, what is that question we want to answer? What's next?
So I think the next thing is to figure out how to measure that. And you mentioned at the outset to not start with your measure, to not start with, well, I really want to use this type of equipment, or I wonder if this works. For a while, the respirator that mimicked your
mask.
CO2 blast mask, right? People would start with, well, I want to use this and see if it impacts performance. Well, let's figure what's the question? Let's start with the question and then figure out how best to measure that. And maybe it's with a simulated respirator. Maybe it's with an actual respirator. Maybe it's not that at all. So I think starting pre methods, all the technology, all the things that you think you want to use, start with a question what do we want to answer? What helps the fire service? And then move forward. And I find that it helps so much to talk with other people, both in the fire service and in the research community, bounce the ideas around, toss the ideas off other people, and begin to kind of design your study. And then the methodology comes in, right? And then you want to find, hopefully, methods or devices that have been peer-reviewed in the literature, that there's some efficacious, there's evidence behind using that device, right? Like a Whoop band or a Fitbit, or there's been research for decades on the efficacy or error rate of a certain thing. Same thing with like measuring body fat, right? Like a Tanita scale versus measuring with calipers versus a DEXA machine. So you want to try to use the most efficacious measure you can, with also weighing that out with it being relevant to the fire service, right? And so maybe doing a sleep study in a lab is the most efficacious for measuring sleep, but that may also not make sense for the firefighter. So then we have to use the next best thing to measure this. So, sometimes it's just this conversation of laying everything out on the table and let's see, okay, what question do we want to ask and what are the best things that we can possibly do? And then pick the ones that make sense for what you want to answer.
And I think that's where before I got into doing my own research, that's where I had some utility, so to speak, because some various labs would call me up and say, we're thinking about designing a study to do this. What do you think? And one of the examples I can give you is a lab was going to use force plates, and they wanted to measure the force of firefighters jumping off the truck. But the thing is, that question doesn't make sense because we don't jump off the truck. We carefully crawl down, trying to, keep as little impact as possible on our joints. So it's like the question didn't make sense. We could definitely design a study for that, but that way of doing it didn't make sense. So I want to also say, I think I already said it, but I want to make it a little bit more clear. Like, if you want to be involved in research, that's fantastic. And you can have a lot of impact by educating the researchers on what the fire service really does, because sometimes they don't know. Dr. Hollerbach knows, though. Career in the fire service. She's just smiling at me.
Yeah, so I was a firefighter for 4 years before I went back to school, and I think it's really important that both the research and the fire service, the research community and the fire service communicate. And I think sometimes it gets lost in translation, but really the fire service researchers that are out there, their main goal is to listen to the fire service and come forward with research questions that benefit the fire service. I know most of the folks out there in the research community that are researching the fire service, and we all want what's best for the fire service. And a lot of them have a background in the fire service, whether it was a dad that was a fire chief, or they know someone, their brother, their sister, their mother, their father was in the fire service. They themselves spent years in the fire service. So I think it's so important to make it a collaborative effort and really get in and communicate with those folks. For researchers in the fire service, right? So for researchers, it's important to kind of pause. You can get so caught up in a conversation or so caught up in a research idea, and that you forget to pause and like, hey, let's ask our resident expert firefighter what they think about this. Is this relevant? Is this something you guys are even talking about? And maybe it's like, nope, don't care, not important. And sometimes there's things that like, okay, it is important, but you're not talking about it. Like perhaps nutrition, like maybe your crew is not talking about nutrition, but you should be. And so we might push this idea forward, but sometimes it's like, oh, what do you think about, I don't know, some kind of sleep technology, and maybe they're just not interested. Or at one point we talked about like an in-ear physiologic status monitor for on scene. And it's like, okay, but how relevant is that? Is a battalion chief or safety officer going to monitor the physiologic status, heart rate, blood pressure, et cetera, of firefighters when they're in an event? I don't know.
Nope.
Right? And so it's so important that as you think through these ideas and how meaningful they might be, you also bring that back to the fire service so that you can ensure that it's relevant. And even if you put the best technology together, they can monitor all these different things while they're on scene. Like maybe an incident commander does not really care about the physiologic status of what's going on. Like we care about the 10 million other things that a fire safety officer has to look at while we're on scene.
You made a really good point earlier, and I want to tie back to it, which is, if you don't tell the fire service the so what, now what, they're not interested. And so I want to give a little plug for, I finally got her to commit. Brittany's going to be on 7 Minute Science. Praise be. on February 24th. Have you decided what you're going to talk about yet?
Nope.
That's right. That's right. You've got time. But also, Dr. Hollerbach is going to be talking at the Women's Tactical Human Performance Summit at OSU OKC as well. And she does know what she's going to be talking about there. So do you want to dive into that just a little bit?
I do. Yeah, we're going to talk about reproductive health and women tactical athletes. So fire, military, police, and some of the things that they come in contact with in the job of a firefighter. And it's more than just like chemical exposure, but it's all of the things, the shift work, the disrupted sleep, the sleep debt, the noise, the physiologic stress, the thermal environment for firefighters. Law enforcement carries lead on their belt that can impact reproductive health. So there's lots of different things that are impacted. And earlier we mentioned a little bit about the offspring of firefighters. So it's not just while you're pregnant, but the after effects of once you give birth and what about breastfeeding. And so all of those things are really important to talk about with women firefighters and also with men firefighters.
I'm excited for it and I can't wait. I mean, it's pretty much past my bedtime. So unless you have another topic and rabbit hole you want to go into, which is totally fine, I think it's time to like tie things up and drop the mic. What do you think?
Absolutely. Mic drop right here.
Well, before the mic drop, though, any final thoughts, either about our trip to New York or about designing research?
I mean, let's be clear. Our trip to New York is going to be amazing. Today's only day one and we're having so much fun. So it's going to be awesome. But about research, I think we started this whole podcast with getting involved in research. And I think it is so important for the fire service to continue to get involved in research. I think AZ and I talked earlier about imposter syndrome and sometimes not knowing what to say or not feeling like you belong. And let me be clear, everyone belongs in research. Everyone has a question that they want to answer. You may not be able to articulate it, but I don't always know how to articulate things either. If y'all know me, you know that I cannot always articulate what is in my brain. But get in a room full of people, whether it's your fire service colleagues, whether it's researchers, whether it's a mixed group of people. We have through NDRI, we run the Science Alliance, and it is a group of literally everybody, fire service, researchers, occupational health folks, and we have a group of fire scholars. So that's people who are in the fire service and also getting an advanced degree. It's so important to have everybody comment on your idea. Has this been done before? Is this relevant? Is it exciting? So if you're unsure about getting in research, reach out, ask questions to people that you know. Reach out to people that you don't know. Honestly, like the research community has been so overwhelmingly nice and welcoming. It's been amazing for me. I started as a firefighter. And listen, when I was in college, I did not know. When I first talked to Sarah Jenke, she was so gracious. She said, "What kind of research are you interested in?" I said, "I think I want to research firefighters."
Oh, that was very broad.
She said, "Okay, do you like quantitative or qualitative research?"
Oh.
I said, "I don't really know." She said, "Okay, that's okay." And then like she just went right into explaining some of the studies that they were doing and inviting me to get involved. So I had zero idea. And she was so gracious. So I say that to say the people that I've come in contact with in fire service research have been so gracious and so kind. And people are just willing to take the time and chat with you. And if you don't know something, like it's totally okay. Let's just have that conversation to make fire service research better.
The researchers in tactical are so nice. They're so nice. All right. I know we can't talk about dogs because you don't have a dog, but that's okay. Is it time to drop the mic?
Mic drop.
All right. I'll let you know next week on the podcast how Wicked and Hamilton work because they're going to be amazing.
It's going to be so great.
Okay. Drop the mic. Bye.